Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear audience, for everyone who has joined us already. We're about to start the second part of our roundtable and discuss the context of Ukrainian avant-garde. The roundtable that is being held in the framework of the FUTUROMARENNIA project and the exhibition that has finally been launched in Mystetskyi Arsenal. And I would like to congratulate you all with that and would like to invite all of you to join us in our exhibition. The exhibition will last till 29th of January in 2022. So please make sure you join us. My name is Igor Oksametny, and I'm one of the co-curators of this exhibition together with Victoria Velichko. I have going to be moderating our today's event, our today's discussion. And to start with, I would like to have a couple of words on the project itself. The project has been supported by Ukrainian Cultural Fund. The main goal for our project is to show the way the futuristic ideas have been shown in the sector of Ukrainian culture in 1910, 1920s. And that is why we have gathered a lot of different materials and exhibits. We have more than 500 exhibits, the visual art, masterpieces, film and photo documents, the unseen issues and publications before, and of course a lot of things that we have used were the technical capacities that the Mystetskyi Arsenal is providing us to visualize and to revive this complex phenomenon that Ukrainian futurism was. Yesterday, we have had the honor to host Oleg Ilnitsky, Przemysław Strożek, and Andrei Boyarov as the main guests of our roundtable. Today, our speakers at the second roundtable we're about to hold, I would like to introduce you with Hanna Veselovska, the Doctor of Art, the Professor of the Institute of Problem of Contemporary Art of the National Academy of Arts of Ukraine. She is the researcher of the Ukrainian Avant-Garde theater. She has authored the book on the Ukrainian Futurism, Ukrainian Theatrical Avant-Garde. We're pleased to welcome Dr. Piotr Ripson, who is the professor for the Polish-Japanese Academy of Computer Technologies, the curator of the Jewish History Institute, and the head of the ICOM Poland. We're also pleased to welcome Yaryna Tsymbal, who is the Ph.D. in Philological Science, who is the literature critic and literature theorist from the Institute of Literature named after Taras Shevchenko of the National Academy of Science of Ukraine. We've discussed the Ukrainian Polish futurism yesterday, given the overall scope, and today our speakers are going to be mentioning the specific aspects of Ukrainian and Polish futurism as well, and we're going to be mentioning the futurism as well. And I'm happy to open with Hanna Veselovska, who's going to give us a lot of information on the futurism and theater in history of Ukraine. So please, Hanna, the floor is yours. Hello, dear ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. It is a pleasure for me to be the part of this really wide-scale project, and it is a pleasure for me to discuss the issue of futurism in Ukraine. Because if we speak about futurism in Ukraine, this is the good way for us to join a very broad and overwhelming broad of culture, the European cultural side and international cultural cycle. I would like to talk about the futurism and theater of in Ukraine, and there's a very important moment, the futurism in Ukraine. It's an important issue for me because we're going to be talking that the theater has been in Ukraine and futurism has been present in Ukraine. They have collaborated in some way, but we cannot say that we have had the really full-scale futuristic theater in Ukraine. We might only mention some serious injections on the theater from the futuristic movement, and we have had some movement towards theater and theatrical arts, but we may not say that we have the full-blooded futuristic theater in Ukraine. Of course, the way the futurism has influenced the theatrical arts, we should start with Mikhail Semenko, and I'm sure that you have discussed his persona yesterday. We have mentioned him multiple times, but I'm sure that we have to start with Mikhail Semenko still. Mikhail Semenko has been the person who has actually made this injection of futurism to Ukrainian theatrical arts. He has really inspired the full circle of people. We started with the Anatol Petritsky and Robert Lisovsky, who have been the people who that Mikhail Semenko has met in 1918 in Kiev, the people who has become the members of the Flamingo group. Speaking of Petritsky, we're going to get back to him a couple of times again. He was definitely an artist who has been working with the futuristics performances throughout his mind frame overall. Speaking on Robert Lisovsky, he's not that wide known in our circles, but I still do believe that in a way he has also implemented his futuristic dream. He has become very famous by making the design for the Lufthansa Airlines, and you know, his Bluebird can still be seen at the main wings of this airline. So let us go through that. When the Semenko has met this group of the young people, that has definitely influenced and has been the main reason for him to also get acquainted with Les Kurbas. And I know that there's a lot of people has written about that, and we had a lot of discussion about that. There are different versions of when did they exactly meet one another, but I do believe that their meeting has taken place in the Young Theatre at the very beginning of 1919. And that was also supported by Petritsky, who has been participating as a designer and in main artistic designer, artistic director in the Young Theatre performances as well. We know that Kurbas has wanted to make one of the performances by the drama that has been written by Mikhail Semenko. Kurbas has been also participating in the editor's board in Semenko's magazine, The Art, and he has been also participating in translation of the Athena, the Dying Art piece. If we will take a look at the preface to this novel and the novel itself, then we can see that there's lots of commonalities between those ideas that have been interesting for Kurbas and the ideas that have interested Semenko as well. They have been discussing the very same destruction of arts. They have been discussing the same death of arts and long-live arts. The highest point of the relations between Semenko and Kurbas were 1920, when Semenko in his Struggle newspaper has included his article that has been titled Les Kurbas and the Presence, that has been a very praising text that has been ended with the words that Les Kurbas on the bridge of the two worlds for the burn and creativity. The injections of the futurisms under the influence of Semenko, they have also covered not just Les Kurbas and not just by Lisovsky and Petritsky, but they're also influenced a broader circle of Les Kurbas' friends, the one that he has met, and he has been working in the theater, in the Young Theater, and that was first of all Marko Tereshchenko. Marko Tereshchenko, that in 1920s, he has already been acquainted with Kurbas at this point. He has collected his troupe that has been under the title of that Central Studio. And then later on, this Central Studio has been reshaped under a different theater, the theater that was titled the Theater of Nat Mikhailichenko. The theater troupe has existed up to 1925, and later on it has been reorganized, and Marko Tereshchenko has started to work in Odessa. We can call the theater group the theater of a real futuristic theater. We might even call them that way. That was a theatrical troupe where the young people, there's directing lab that has been working together with Nat Mikhailichenko. They've tried to set out the futuristics performances based on the poems of Ukrainian poets. And the same ideas that Marko Tereshchenko has proclaimed, he have supported at the pages of the Futuristics magazines. We know, for the first of all, that we had seen the manifesto of performance, the art of performance in 1921 by Taras Shevchenko, but then he publishes the continuation, the second article. This is the book, The Art of Acts. And this is the book that has been published in 1921. And his article has been titled just the same way, The Art of Action and the Act of Performance. And then it's been built for the methods of theatrical work, of how you should deal with this performative arts. He has also published his article, The Present and the Past of the Performance Arts. His connection to futurism, Marko Tereshchenko has also supported with the other points of view and other positions and other actions. He has been among the ones who have signed the declaration of Ukrainian pan-futurism, the one that has been published in the Summer Forum of Future magazine, that one had claimed that the arts is the outdated feature of the past. They have spoken about the death of arts, the liquidation of arts, the disease of arts, and the prevalence of pan-futurism. Later on, those articles that have been published in the Summer Forum of Future, they have been published as a separate leaflets. That has been published in the Holmström Publishing House in 1922. It also has included a libretto of a performance of the futuristic performance by Marko Tereshchenko, the one that has been titled "The Sky is Burning." Thus, the activities and the main action of this theater has been basically the most important example of the futuristic art, theatrical art in Ukraine. We can say that based on those declarations by Marko Tereshchenko that I've already mentioned, and we can say that as well due to the close collaboration between Marko Tereshchenko and Ukrainian futurists and Ukrainian poets, because he has been making those performances based on the poems of Pavlo Tychina, Susura, Elan Blakitny, Chulmak. He has been made this first performance of the House of the New World that has been shown in Kiev. That was a musical and theatrical composition based on the poems of those poems. It has been very, very abstractive composition that has been, first of all, a unification of the characters, so you're using only the really high dramatic actions and gestures and just making the compositions, the settings really remarkable and resembling any kind of geometrical figure. The second performance he made, the second performance that has been made only with a futuristic poetry, they're based on Heosh Kurupisa, Manko, and Skripnik. The Sky is Burning, and this libretto has been published in this small leaflets as well as a separate piece. The artistic supporter of the performance was Vadim Meller. That is an important fact as well, because at this moment we have yet another injection of futurism to another artist, Vadim Meller, because the first masterpiece, the first play, The House of the New World, that was a joint work between Petritsky and Semenko. They were acquainted for quite a longer time, and they have been collaborating together significantly before. After the performance, The Sky is Burning, Nat Mikhailichenko's theaters make another couple of the performances, and they're showing the next performances. They have been making the plays for the play that has been called The Pitiful March, based on the poems of Mykola Lyubchenko, but that their next famous performance was The Carnival. The Carnival, based on Roman Roland's text in translation of Yuri Yanovsky. And this Carnival has been artistically directed and artistically supported by Vadim Meller. Using these paintings to this performance, we might see this approach to the destruction of arts. I mean, all of the figures, they exist separately from one another. And when the composition and all of those pictures are being collected through the separation of the figures one from another and only then collecting them with one background. This is a photo out of this performance, the way it looked like. The performance had a lot of satirical moments, a lot of humor, and overall the satire, the parodies, the sarcasm, all of the comedy and humor techniques and methods that were available at that time. They have been used in multiple plays by theater of Nat Mikhailichenko. And they have been an important directorial methodology of Marko Tereshchenko, of his directorial method. This is once again the Carnival play that has been shown in Kiev's opera in 1923. Vadim Malert has been the set and artistic director, and with the support of Borokivsky. So the activity of Marko Tereshchenko has been in some way disturbing to Les Kurbas because he didn't agree to some of the ideas of Marko Tereshchenko, and this idea of the collective action and collective performance has not been close to Les Kurbas, but still, despite that, this period from 1920, 1925, the relations between Kurbas and Tereshchenko, they have been friendly, they have been quite close friends with one another, and there is a lot of information about some of the moments of recollections on the modern arts between the two of them. They still can be found in Les Kurbas' text as well. So up till 2026, Semenko has been balancing between supporting Marko Tereshchenko in his search and between his friendship with Les Kurbas as well. Moreover, Semenko, throughout these years, he has become a very influential figure in the theatrical environment. And of course, his interest in theater was very important. He tried to work in theater directly, and you can read out his reports on the performances and plays, and he has been making the overviews of the traditional plays that has been directed by Alexander Zakharov in Kiev under a different pen name. And we can see that he has influenced the theatrical environment overall, and we can see the different publications on Semenko in the publication that has been provided by the Berezil Theater, that has been supported by Les Kurbas, the Barricades of Theater magazine, when they had an article that had been titled Mikhail Semenko and Pan-Futurism. There was a very clear characterization of the main ideas of this direction and the main ideas that Semenko has had. Except for the experimentation of Marko Tereshchenko, we have to recall another couple of other theatrical groups that have been operating in Kiev, and they have tried to do something futuristic as well. One of those groups has been headed by Oleksiy Kapla, and they have been making the political performances. Sometimes they worked with in Russian language. They have made the performances Hands of China or Can You Hear Us Moscow. There is another director that has been also tied up between Les Kurbas and the director Zach Kornitsky, who has been working with a political workshop named after the 1st of May. And with this theatrical troupe, they have also prepared the different types of social political performances. For example, the international community of the support to the revolutionary actors, and they've tried to make the same performances during his Kiev period. That has already been said. The 1926 has become the year of the final breakup between Mikhailo Semenko and Les Kurbas. And of course, it's quite obvious that there has been a lot of reasons why their ways have parted, but Mikhail Semenko has made his choice over the transformation to futurism. He's now preferring Anatol Petritsky, that has been collaborating with a theater named Ivan Franko in Kharkiv. and he's supporting basically Ivan Franko's theater in Kharkiv. I cannot speak about the Ivan Franko's theater in Kharkiv as the one who would follow the Futurism. It's not applicable throughout these years. Of course, they have made some avant-garde performances that Boris Laholin as a director has provided, but still, the futuristic injection, if we can say this way, on this theater, if we speak about this theater, has had this injection of futurism that had happened with the support of Anatol Petrytsky, and due to Anatol Petrytsky, who had provided the design on the main artistic production of the state from the performance based on Marko Kropivnitsky's layout and retransformed by Ostap Vyshnya. We had a lot of publications over this performance. What was so futuristic about that, and what did Anatol Petrytsky has offered? So we might mention this performance as a performance that had a lot of futuristic ideas represented and implemented on the stage. There was a lot of good, interesting publications from Les Courbas students. They both, the two students of Les Courbas, they have went to see the premiere of the V performance. They have seen it twice, and they have given a very detailed outline to Les Courbas about how this performance went. The key idea for them was the futuristic setup. There was a scene at Mars. So the Ukrainians go to Mars and they've met Martians there, and then he comes back into a very archaic environment to Polysium, and then he goes to the lake from the forest song. This moment, as the people said, it lasted only for 3 minutes, but it has been a key sequence in the play. And based on the idea of it, we can see that there was a key sequence, that there was the tryout to get outside of the familiar environment, to get outside of the Ukrainian folklore environment, a tryout to set out to a completely different world at Mars. But okay, to meet Martians there was 25 Martians, but still not be able to stick there and to get back somewhere you belong. As the eyewitnesses have mentioned, it all has been done in the best way. The machinery, the stud design has been done in a perfect way, and it has also been done using the screens that go up and down, and they have been crisscrossing, creating a new stage place. Again, the students of Les Courbas, they have said that it was very good. That's actually, their costumes resemble the Aelita costumes. This Mars stage was also, this Mars sequence has lasted only for 3 minutes, but it made the most significant impact on people. This work of Anatoly Petrytsky in this Ivan Franko's theater that hasn't been completed in any way, because the Franko's theater, they have been then on following the more realistic artistic directions, even though in the New Generation magazine in 2025, they're still been supporting the activities of Ivan Franko's theater, even though, of course, there was no serious contacts after that and no serious collaboration between Semenko and Natyura. They didn't have it later on. Anatol Petrytsky has become the main artistic director and the main artist for Kharkiv Opera, and his future dreaming, FUTUROMARENNIA, has also been implemented very brightly in the activities of the opera theater. You know, opera theater, the musical theater of the second half of 1920s, has taken a very significant position in Ukrainian avant-garde and for Ukrainian avant-gardes. And we might also see that by following this project of the main building of Kharkiv Opera Theater that hasn't been unfortunately implemented. These activities, these avant-garde activities that have been connected with the ideas of the futurisms in the opera, it has not only been connected with the name of Anatol Petrytsky, it has also been connected to Alexander Kostanko-Khvostov. So one of the first ideas, his ideas over there, were the 9 templates for the Prokofiev play, The Love to the Three Oranges, that has to be staged in Kharkiv Opera. It has never been set out. It was planned to be that it will be directed by director Lapitsky, but unfortunately through the time distance, we see that it's even for better that it has never been performed, because Lapitsky was a very stubborn realist as a director, and he wouldn't have been fully capable of evaluating these fantastic projections and those fantastic offers that Alexander Khvostenko-Khvostov has been providing for as an artistic direction for what has to be done on the stage. What else has to be mentioned, that the opera theater, the artists in the opera theaters and the artistic directors in the opera theaters, they were not always dealing with the avant-garde pieces. Most of the cases, they know how to reprocess, they know how to retell in a futuristic way, not only the Love to the Three Oranges, but the Turandot opera and the Prince Igor opera as well. So that is the material that Igor Petritsky starting to work with, and starting from 1928 at the stage of Kharkiv Opera. We have seen the Turandot in his set design, and in the direction of Labert, who has come from Prague and who has come to Ukraine at that very moment. He still considered that he will be able to find the creative ground for his production. He didn't feel comfortable in Prague at that time. And the next performance was the Prince Igor, directed by Gregor, who has also come to Ukraine from Russia at that point of time, and has also been under the artistic direction of Petritsky. The solutions there have been mostly decided by the artist. In first case, I've mentioned Alexander Khvostenko-Khvostov and Anatol Petritsky in the other cases. And it was a very important reason for outline as well, because it was against the tradition of the psychologization of opera that has been common to the Russian stage at that moment. And Lapitsky has been one of the foundators of that, the one who hasn't made the performance in Ukraine. That was a very spectacular performances. They have been really fascinating for the people of that time. They were fascinating for both the citizens of Kharkiv and the foreigners who visited Ukraine at those points and who have visited the performances of Kharkiv Opera. First of all, to see Prince Igor performance. We also have to mention the Hopkins brand that has been also been provided in 1931, and Petritsky as an artist and set designer has been working on that, and he has been providing that as well in a very avant-garde way. We have the continuation of the futuristic project by Khvostenko-Khvostov in Kiev in 1929. The Kiev has seen one of the most high-tech operas, the Johnny playing. The Kshonet, he was a very young composer at this time. His music at that moment has been the very avant-garde music, and it has had a little bit of cautious appreciation in Europe, but Pshonach has been staged in Ukraine, one of the first in Kiev and then in Odessa. The director of the Kiev performance was Mikhailo Daskovsky, and he is the director who has built up a very dynamic, very vivid production. That was also an important moment, because before that the theater was also like to have the continuation and the coherence of action, and the avant-gardists, especially the futurists, they wanted to make a performance as an editing principle. So they tried to do that in editing way, when one sequence is completely divided from the other sequence and it's just going to be edited and cut. So this are some of the photos of this play, and you can see there has been a multi-layered construction at the backgrounds, and those constructions have been made as some kind of a flying machine. You can see there is some kind of like a moonwalking device on the stage. And as Khvostenko-Khvostov has writing out, due to this movement characteristics of the stage that have emphasized the dramatic action and has been broadening the scenic space, it's all had a a significant impact on audience. Also, in this performance, they have used the modern communication types. They used radio, telephones. They even used the sound of different sounds that have been connected to the sounds of the cities that have been used as a part of this performance. And that was a very important to show the atmosphere of the new world and the modern contemporary city. The next stage of the futurization of that has been made with the help of the artists during the theatrical performances. The next stage has been supported by Anatoly Petritsky in Kharkiv, but that has now touched the ballet. Speaking of the ballet, and Anatoly Petritsky has shifted from the fable to this reality that is facing the modern Ukraine at that main point, the one that have everyone been expecting at that moment that we might be critical towards now. But we're speaking about industrialization, about the construction of the really huge, big project, and the industrial project. And as Anatoly Petritsky has said, that the 5-year plan needs industrialization, automation of production, the change of the processes of economy is going to change the art and our everyday life. The same characteristics that all of the sectors of the world will have, the art will have as well. And his ballet, the football player that has been dedicated to the issues of sports, that has been dedicated to the football players when the main character was the football player, and the main events that took place in the stadium, in the shop, they have all ended with this industrial carnival as well. Moreover, in the final of this industrial carnival, the modern dances has been danced as well. And they have shown those natural events, and they have shown the coal, the oil, the natural resources have been shown. All of those things that will only make industrialization possible. It was clear that it wasn't really connected to this football player ballet because it was very primitive, but that was the main sequence of the play. The main sequence of the play where they try to use that for promoting and propaganding the industrial future. As far as I understand, I do not have a lot of time to talk to you about that, but I still want to mention yet another important person that has influenced Ukrainian theater in a significant way, but he hasn't been nurtured by Ukrainian environment. He has come to Ukraine in 1929 and he tried to make a couple of the futuristic performances in Ukraine. That's Igor Tarantiev. Igor Tarantiev, he has been born in Ukraine, but up till coming to Ukraine in 1929, he has become famous as an experimenting director abroad. And in 1929, he comes back to Ukraine and he has started out to be very active, and I would even say aggressive in experimenting in Ukrainian theater, in different theaters. He started in Lugansk, he has been experimenting in Odessa, in Dnipro, in Vinnytsia, in Kherson, and also Igor Tarantiev has been in close collaboration with the New Generation magazine. So speaking about the support of the theatrical arts from the side of the New Generation newspaper, then of course we're going to be saying that the support of Marko Tereshchenko is considered, supported Anatoly Petritsky as the main artist of the Ivan Franko Theater in Kharkiv, and the support for Marko Tereshchenko, as mentioned at the beginning of my speech. Oscop that Igor Tarantiev has also had been an important part of this process. There was an idea that he's going to be the leader of the leftist front in Ukrainian theater, and he is going to be the certain opposition to the one that we've had already. The one has been had by Les Kurbas and his troupe. This kind of attitudes towards Tarantiev has been said that we had Les Kurbas and Ivan Mykytenko joining him in his premiere just to see what he was doing. He has also showed his idea, the theater of the socialistic competition that has been created by Igor Terentiev and that has been making performances in Ukraine for some time. One of the big scandalous performances was the performance of 1920, 1931, the weirdo that has caused us important resonance in the society, that was that kind of new towards traditional Ukrainian theater. It has been closed a very fast time, so Igor Terentiev was forced to leave Odessa. He has been working with his theater later on, and with his theater he has been as well in close collaboration with Nedolia, one of the biggest screenwriters at that point, and one of his plays have been published in the New Generation magazine. In the same time, Igor Terentiev has been making the performance based on Mina Mazailo by Mykola Kulish. But this play, in the interpretation of Igor Terentiev, it has had a completely different sound and completely different emphases and highlights. And the main moments was to make a parody on Ukrainian literary figures, on the people who have not supported at that point, that has not been supported by the futuristics, by the futurist of the new generation and the members of the magazine of the new generation. The most scandalous performance by Igor Terentiev was the shot performance by Alexander Bezamensky, and the play in poems that has been translated by Semenko. That was an important fact because, again, Korbas was not supported with any ambitions of Mikhailo Semenko in his drama performances. But then when the Bezamensky's play, translated by Semenko, has been shown in multiple theaters and has been staged by Taras Shevchenko in Odessa, for example, and has been staged by Taras Shevchenko in 1930 in Dnipro city. That was the project for the theater of Dnipro city that hasn't been fully completed. It has been completed, but the theater does not look like it should have been at the project. Yes, Hanna, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry for interrupting you, but I just wanted to remind you that we have limited timing and we still have the questions from the audience coming. Yes, of course, I'll try to wrap it up. So basically this, again, the performance that was called The Shots, and I can already ended up. I can send, if you'll be interested in this performance, I can also mention you my publications on Igor Terentiev's activities as well. And I can also say that, yes, Ukrainian theater in the end was close to futurism, and all of those injections of futurism made by Mikhail Semenko, they have been very aggressive and they have been active and have been seen. But we cannot speak of Ukrainian theater as a futuristic theater. We can only mention the Marko Tereshchenko early works in his works of 1991, 1992. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Hanna. Thank you very much. I just wanted to remind our audience that you also can participate in our discussion. You can comment, you can ask questions under our stream. And I would like to mention a couple of the questions that have already been expressed by our audience. I would like to read them out if I may. So Hanna, there's a question for you. So can you tell us what are the modern theaters in Ukraine that might be called the most futuristic? It's a very difficult question for me, I would say, because I do believe that, you know, those are the theaters that are working with a very modern technologies that can be called futuristics. For example, those are the projects that have been completed with the help of multiple screens or video projections that might be called futuristics right now. At this moment, I cannot recall. Okay, yes, I've recalled the Kostyninsky direction. I do believe that he has shown a very futuristic project for the Hamlet performance. And I do believe that if we will making this comparisons, then we can make these comparisons like this with this kind of performances as made by him. Thank you. And another question, why we do not know a lot about Igor Tereshchenko, unlike we know about Les Kurbas, one of our audience is asking. Well, Mark Tereshchenko, we know a lot, we don't know we know quite a lot about Marko Tereshchenko, but he has been under the shadow. No, Ihor Terentiev. Oh, Ihor Terentiev, we know a lot about Ihor Terentiev. We have publications and the monographies in the West about him. We do not know enough about his Ukrainian period, of work, but I've tried to fill this gap in my research as well. We do not have a lot of photos, and we don't have a lot of photos about this. His performances, because they didn't last for a longer times, but he's about his performances and the overall overviews of that. We have a lot of that. Yes, thank you very much, Hanna. And I think that I would like to pass the floor to Piotr Ripson. He's going to continue our today's roundtable with the Polish futurism topics. He's going to tell us about Bruno Yashinsky and Lviv. So please, Piotr, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to this interesting round table. I believe it's high time that research on the various avant-gardes, especially on the kind of fringe avant-gardes in Central and Eastern Europe, become more supranational and involve scholars from different fields. I've prepared a short presentation to which I'm going to switch right now, and it is a short story that is probably little known, at least in Poland, it's little known to scholars, of which the main protagonist is Bruno Yashinsky, one of the most prominent figures of Polish futurism, which was a very loud but a short-lived literary phenomenon in Polish culture between, say, in 1917, 15. The wartime is a little bit less precise because of the dynamics of the war at that time, and basically by 1923 we can say that futurism in Poland was declared, even by the futurists, to be over. So my narrative is going to be about a side track of Polish futurism when Bruno Yashinsky moves to Lviv, which is at that time within the Polish borders. It is considered by Poles a kind of a Polish-Ukrainian city, and plays an interesting role, I think, in the development of the avant-garde in Poland in general. So I'm switching now to the presentation. Here it is. Okay, can you see it? Can you see the presentation? Yes?
Yes, we can see that. Thank you.
Okay, all right. I tried to blow it up, but it seems that I cannot. Okay, that's better. All right, so let's move to Lviv. Although Lviv was never considered to be a very central place for the development of the early avant-gardes in Poland, for the Polish side of culture, so to speak. However, the first exhibition of expressionism and futurism and cubism takes actually place in Lviv before such phenomena reach Krakow or Warsaw or other cities. So it's a very early start, which is this is 1913, which is broken by the war. And after the First World War ends and Lviv becomes part of the Polish territory with serious conflicts with the Ukrainian population and fights between the Poles and the Ukrainians and the Jews in the city. I'm not going to discuss that. We have a number of phenomena that appear very quickly in Lviv that are connected to futurism in a very wide sense. Futurism basically was a movement that had a literary character and was the main protagonists were writers, were poets, Bruno Yashinsky, Alexander Wat, Anatol Stern, Stanisław Młodożeniec, and the most versatile artist and poet of them all, Taras Shevchenko, who was both a painter and maybe formostly a painter, but also a poet and a theater play author. Formism, I would say, was one of these movements in Europe that were very eclectic, that tried to catch up both with Cubism, Futurism, Dada to a certain extent, and invented different code words, different isms to define their character. So we had ultraism in Spain, and in Poland we had formism. Formism, which was just a way for the visual arts to stress that the form of the work of art is the predominant quality that artists should focus on much more than its content. This has to do to a great extent with this dichotomy in Polish culture where the verbal, symbolic, literary, and narrative was very dominant in the arts. And once independence of this new state was gained, a number of artists thought, we have to get rid of these old narratives and symbols. We have to focus on the form, which is the main element and feature of the new arts. So they call themselves formists, and we can understand that some of the artists within the formist group were aligned with the futurists, with the main person being Taras Shevchenko. And formism became a movement that was very widespread. One of the artists said that in 1918, 1920, if you wanted to say that you are a modern painter, you would say you are a formist. So you have a very wide plethora of stylistics, individual stylistics within this movement. And some of the artists are living in Lviv at that time. Jan Hrynkowski, among others, Leon Dążycki, and so forth. So Lviv, together with Krakow and Warsaw and Poznan to a certain extent, becomes one of the centers of the formist movement. The third formist exhibition takes place in Lviv with already more artists from the city, Ludwik Lille, Zofia Forzimer, and so forth. But by 1923, formism starts to go into decline. And what happens in the city, and I'm trying to look at this narrative that I'm having here from a city perspective, is that the city goes silent with the modern arts for a moment. The young artists, which will become central for the new arts in Lviv, which is the artist group alongside the Ukrainian artistic formations, they will basically start their mature activity at the end of the decade, around 1928, 29. So 22, 24 is a moment where this young generation is leaving the city, and there is a certain vacuum in the sense of I would say, Polish cultural modernistic presence there. There are some interesting phenomena and examples of things happening in town. For example, Polish Jewish expressionism finds its very vocal court in the person of Ludwig Lille, who is illustrating a couple of books, a book by Bolesław Dan, The Song of Songs, and a collection of poems by Rilke, published in 1922 in Lviv. This is another dimension, I would say, of this modernism, which is rooted also in expressionism, and especially perhaps in Jewish expressionisms. It's very difficult to draw hard lines between these phenomena, as I would say a number of them have exactly this multifaceted, not a very linear type of character. Also, Gilgamesh by Joseph Witlin is being illustrated by Lille, and in 1923, the first prose work by Bruno Yashinsky appears precisely in Lviv, in the publishing house Odrodzenie. The cover of this slightly erotic story is made by Sigmund Valyshevsky, a young formist artist who recently came from Tiflis, from Tbilisi, where he was together with the Zdanievich brothers and with the members of the Georgian Avant-Garde in the city. And this appearance of this book gives a start, so to say, or opens the floor to the presence of Bruno Yashinsky in the city. Now, who is Bruno Yashinsky, who moves to Lviv or Lviv around 1923? He's a very well-known author, perhaps the most known Polish futurist, with such publications as this one daily Nóż w brzuchu, a poster-style publication, Knife in the Belly, with the altered orthography, futuristic orthography, 2 or 3 books of poetry, one of them already very strongly leaning to the left, which is this small image here on the top right, Pieśń o głodzie, the song about hunger. And he not only is a very vocal, very vibrant voice to be heard in cafes and theaters in Krakow, Warsaw, Zakopane, and so forth, but also a character that is self-styling himself into a very modernist, a little bit blasé person with a monocle in his eye and extravagant clothing and a tie. In 1924, a very important book comes out which signals a shift from futurism to constructivism, actually, in style. And this is a book of poetry by 2 authors, by Bruno Yashinsky and his colleague from Warsaw, Anatol Stern, a futurist poet who was active together with Alexander Watt in the capital of Poland. It's called Ziemia na lewo, the earth to the left, and it's the first photomontage type of publication with constructivist typography, and the cover by Mieczysław Szczuka, an artist connected to the Communist Party of Poland, a very important constructivist and propaganda artist who unfortunately died at a very young age of 29, I believe, in the Warsaw Mountains. So 1924, we have this first publication with this Lisicki quotation on the cover of the Red Wedge and so forth, and a very kind of self-defining publication of Bruno Yashinsky and his compatriot as this proletarian poets. This is the whole collection is about the proletariat and the exploitation and so forth. and is using a very strong expressive tone, attacking the bourgeoisie and so forth. So this is how Bruno Yashinsky appears on the scene in 1924, where in those years, 23, 24, he moves to Lviv. And sorry for this long Polish quotation, which is taken from one of the Polish language publications in Lviv, Kuriel Garycejski. However, Bruno Yashinsky moves to Lviv and gets married there to a daughter of someone who seems to be a very wealthy and influential person, Herman Arem. It seems that he was also a shareholder and an important shareholder in the Baczewski distillery. And I'm mentioning this because finances seem to play a certain role in this story. We don't know much about Klara Arem, the wife of Bruno Yashinsky. She's his first wife. He got remarried later, married again in Moscow in the 1930s. However, Yashinsky marries Klara, moves to Lviv as this famous, notorious, I would say, futurist poet, and he started to become the head publisher of a magazine called Vinnytsia, just like this town in Western Ukraine. I'm not very clear why this name Vinnytsia, which of course means also a place where the wine grapes grow and wine is being produced, why this name has been chosen. And here the futurist Yashinsky, in charge of the magazine Vinnytsia, is transformed into, I would say, a different persona. These are the covers of the magazine Vinnytsia, which are suggesting a modernistic bourgeois type of publication, which is addressed to the Polish-speaking middle class, so to speak. And it starts its run with a very pompous and loud type of advertisement and self-declarations. It's very richly produced on very good paper, with expensive full-color plates and so forth, and a number of foreign authors that were rarely presented in Polish language beforehand. So here you have some of the names of people that are involved in the publication. You have Polish writers such as Bruno Yashinsky or Kornel Makuszyński, August Zamoyski, a very famous formist sculptor, and so forth. But from the foreign authors, we have Guillaume Apollinaire, Averchenko, Ilya Ehrenburg, Hans Heitz Evers, and Claude Farrer. We have the semi-pornographic Pitti Grilli and Severnianin, and so forth and so forth and so forth. The magazine is illustrated by members of the École de Paris, such as Alicja Halicka and Moise Kisling, but also by people connected with the Polish avant-garde, such as Felix Kowarski or Felix Krasowski, but also Art Nouveau, such as Malczewski, Tomorowicz, Weiss, Wiczulkowski, and so forth. So we have this strange cocktail of traditional and modern, very gifted illustrators from Paris and so forth and so forth, and a lot of very famous names. Question is, what connects all these names and authors? And this turns out to be nakedness and eroticism. And Bruno Yashinsky, the futurist, appears suddenly in Lviv as the author of, or the editor of soft erotic magazine for the middle class with a modernist edge to it, represented by modernist authors. His partner, compatriot from Warsaw, Anatol Stern, is also writing for the magazine, and artists such as Kiesling and Weiss and others are adding nakedness in a modern garb to the magazine. Even Alicja Halicka, who is the wife of Louis Marcoussis and is a well-doing artist in Paris at that time, is adding her delicate drawings to the magazine. The role of Bruno Yashinsky here is multifaceted. On the one hand, he is giving his name as the publisher, or as the editor of the magazine. Secondly, he becomes an author of very different type of material in the magazine. For example, he draws a comic strip on the vampire, a drama from the life of the courtesans. He is also using the typography elements and stylistic elements from the futuristic vocabulary to produce erotic poetry illustrated by himself here with this crude illustration of the futuristic Venus. And it turns out that he is also the author of numerous illustrations in the magazine itself, typographic interventions, and even translations. For example, here, the poem by Igor Oksametny, which is translated by Bruno Yashinsky. So from the futurist poet and a revolutionary author, suddenly in the mid-1920s, Yashinsky becomes a publisher or an editor of a magazine with soft-core contents addressed to the middle class and to the bourgeoisie, with a number of authors who are providing adequate content. Not only that, the Vinnytsia magazine, which is published on what is today Dudaeva 5, before the war, Zimorowicza 5, in this building to the left, is publishing a number of different things, as it is part of a bigger publisher's venture called Atheneum. And Atheneum, apart from a number of very different types of publications, serious, legal, just pulp fiction and so forth, is also publishing a twin magazine, which is called Torpeda. And it seems that Bruno Yashinsky is also responsible as a hidden editor in this, venture. It's same years, 1924, 25. And we see in this magazine also the hand of Bruno Yashinsky in a number of moments, such as, for example, this story called Klucze, Potestas Clavium, written by Bruno Yashinsky, which is a longer narrative in the magazine. As you can see, the authors in Torpeda represent a similar cocktail to what we've seen with Vinnytsia. So we've got Apollinaire again here, and Ehrenburg, and Evers, and Gustav Meyring even, and Paul Verlaine, etc., etc., etc. And it seems also that Bruno Yashinsky is exploited in his drawing talents also in this magazine. So in fact, we are dealing with a magazine that is published with very similar content under two different titles. Now, this short episode of the editorial activity of Bruno Yashinsky in Lviv is over by 1925. And there is a number of interesting coincidences that are coming together in, I would say, a quite cohesive narrative about who was Bruno Yashinsky in Lviv in those years, and why did he choose to become the author of something quite contradictory to what he was doing before. By 1923, when he appears in Lviv, Tadeusz Piper is publishing his last issue of a magazine published in Krakow called Zwrotnica, where he is declaring in that magazine the death of futurism. And this death of futurism is also countersigned by futurist authors such as Taras Shevchenko and others. So the year of the death of the proclaimed death of futurism is the year when Bruno Yashinsky appears in Lviv. In a way, I would say, without already with this nimbus of futurism significantly broken. By 1925 in Lviv, Tadeusz Piper, who is declared by then the Pope of the Polish avant-garde, is publishing his first very significant manifesto of new literature called Nowe Usta, the New Mouth, in the same publishing house Atheneum, where he is pointing to the constructivist approach in literature as the desired one, poezja jako budowa, poetry as building, as construction, and the book of poetry is illustrated by Fernand Léger. So Piper, in a way, is responsible both for the closing of the Polish futurist coffin in 1923 and also for the start of the new avant-garde chapter in the city of Lviv in the same publishing house. So Yashinsky, I would say, and I'll be coming soon to the conclusion, is so to speak caught between two vectors. On the one hand, he's out of the futuristic stage because the futurist theater has been declared closed. On the other, as a newly declared, self-declared proletarian author, he finds himself in a bourgeois city, probably the most well-to-do city on the Polish territory in the mid-1920s, in a situation of a pen for hire. So in a way, he's selling out his futuristic symbolic luggage and wealth to the milieu and society which he so much despised. One thing we are not sure of, and there are two big questions here, is who was actually responsible for that avant-gardistic episode in Lviv in the mid-1920s, with the presence of very important figures from the Polish avant-garde, such as Bruno Yashinsky and Tadeusz Piper. And with Tadeusz Piper, I have to add, he was an importer of the Spanish avant-garde into Polish culture and literature in the early 1920s. And in Winnica, also one of these ultraist poets that was basically unknown in our territories, Ramon Gomez de la Serna, is being published in a translation, I would assume, by Tadeusz Piper. So one big question here is who was responsible for these strange appearances in Lviv involving Polish avant-garde. Second thing is related very much to the very persona of Bruno Yashinsky. We know, and it has been said and presented for years, that Bruno Yashinsky in Lviv was one of the main collaborators of proletarian theater in the city. There is not that much documentation about it, but taking that for good truth, it is very difficult to connect these two, I would say, faces of the Bruno Yashinsky, the erotic literature and culture editor, and the proletariat writer for the workers' theater. This is an interesting question in context of future of the future of Bruno Yashinsky, who leaves Lviv in 1925 to Paris. He basically maintains that he is kicked out of Poland. He writes in Paris his very famous novel, I Burn Paris, Palem Paris, and he's expelled from France and finally finds himself in Moscow, in Soviet Russia, in the Soviet Soviet Union, as a very cherished proletarian poet. So that séjour in Lviv doesn't fit very well with this narrative, and I think this is a question that should be given some attention in the future. And the third thing which I find very interesting is the gender issue that we see here within the futurist framework. The production of Winnica and Torpeda are representing extremely sexist type of attitude towards women as such, and it would be very interesting to analyze how that falls within the context of a general futurist framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Piotr. And we have some questions coming from the audience for you, but we also have some questions to Hanna as well. So if I may, I will first voice out the question to Hanna, and then we'll get back to you, Piotr. So Hanna, can you please tell us what was the most successful play at that time? I guess the futuristic play was, what play was the most successful at the time? Thank you very much for this question. I think that was the works of Marko Tereshchenko. That's what I have mentioned, the Carnival that I've mentioned. And we also had another play that was titled The Universal Necropole, based on Ilya Ehrenburg's play. And I think that was a very relevant and very highly acclaimed play. Thank you. Thank you. We have questions for you, Piotr. Can you please tell us why, in your opinion, the Polish formism has decreased its existence? So whether it is connected that it has been only focusing on the shape, on the form of it with no additional content, and it creates the emptiness. So do you believe whether only highlighting the form but not the content limits the artist in some way?
Well, my answer to that would be that formism, just as a number of other isms, was a movement that tried to catch up very much with the European mainstream, which was, you know, I mean, the beginnings of Cubism and futurist art go well a decade earlier. So this is one thing, is that okay, we have to produce work just as the other artists in Western Europe or in Southern Europe are doing. On the other hand, when they started to look for the original, for the natural, for the also national, for the own in folk art, it kind of became obvious that these researchers are not leading very far, or otherwise they are pushing the formist art towards a sort of a national art. And formist became opposed to expressionism, for example, which was identified with Germany and with the German influence. Formists started to be understood as a kind of a, you know, folksy version of the avant-garde. But I think the main reason for the decline of formism was that with Tadeusz Piper, who comes from Spain, and Władysław Strzemiński, who comes from Vitebsk, after working with Kazimierz Malewicz and Katarzyna Kobro, who comes along with him, the constructivist movement becomes very, very strongly manifested. And in post-war Eastern Europe, impoverished, destroyed, in ruins, I think the futurist chaos and the dynamics meant much less to the young, especially young audience, than the lucid ideas of the constructivist movement. And so basically I would say it was this new avant-garde wave that finished the Polish futurist and the formist experience.
Thank you. Thank you. And we have another question. Speaking on geography, what was the city in Poland is considered to be the city of futurists? Is it Warsaw or Krakow or any other city?
Well, this is a very interesting question. When we were doing an exhibition at the National Museum on the centenary of the avant-garde in Poland, which we were able to convince our right-wing government to proclaim this as a kind of a national year. It was a very funny thing. So a number of institutions did something about the avant-garde on the national level. And I asked a curator at the National Museum to do an exhibition about cities, not about movements. So we had the avant-garde in Lviv, we had the avant-garde in Poznań, we had the avant-garde in Warsaw and in Krakow. Because in each of the cities, the avant-gardistic mixture was very, very different. Poznań was within the sphere, I would say, of the influence of Berlin. So it was an expressionist city. The expressionists were very present there. Łódź, which I didn't mention, was a city where the Jewish avant-garde was extremely present. And it was influenced both by artists such as Marc Chagall or also by the Kulturliga from Kiev, actually. And artists, there was a lot of connections there. Warsaw and Krakow would be the formist cities, and Lviv would fall because it was in Galicia, together with Krakow in that region. It was formist as well. But you know, it's very interesting to look from the city perspective, because Poland was divided into three. So basically in 1918 we had three culturally different regions, and it took quite a long time for those regions start to talk to each other, same language. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And we have yet another question coming up to you, Ifmal. So do you plan to continue in researching the sexist concept that you have mentioned by the end of your report?
I would love to ask someone else to do that. One practical reason is I think the research should be done in the art. You know, I think the reason why this story is practically little known or unknown is that the magazine is absolutely obscure. I don't think one library in Poland has the full run of a very richly produced a thick magazine. So I think not only the magazine itself, which we have now, digital versions, etc., but the archival material about the publishing house Athenaeum, etc., and all circumstances around that is very crucial, and that needs definitely Ukrainian archives to be consulted. So hopefully, maybe with my Ukrainian colleagues, we can think of something that would bring shed more light on this phenomenon.
Thank you. And we have Yaryna Tsymbal coming to us as well. So Yaryna, we would like to pass the floor to you because you're going to tell us a little bit about the Ukrainian futurism in the multitude of arts. And as far as I understand that you're going to be discussing the issues of the synthesis of the arts. Yes, good evening, dear colleagues. Good evening, dear colleagues and dear audience. I'm really happy that finally we are in this way acknowledging many years ago this centenary of Ukrainian futurism that happened in 2014 actually, but we know that the events of 2014 in Ukraine has definitely taking our attention of the historical dates. So right now being in 2021, it is the final moment when we can speak about the centenary and 106 years of Ukrainian futurism. And so today I would like to talk to you about one of the key and the most important futuristic ideas for us, that was the Ukrainian futurism in the multi-tangled of arts, the main tryouts of the Ukrainian pan-futurism to try out to combine the different arts into one art, and what has happened due to that. Because as far as we're speaking about the synthesis of the arts, and it's really hard to understand it without the illustration. So that is why I would like to also show you a short presentation. So I would like to offer you a presentation as well, the presentation that will have the main illustration for this material that I am about to tell you. So the main tryouts to practically synthesize the different types of art, they have been based in the Ukrainian pan-futurism. According to the Mikhail Semenko theory of cults that he has created in 1924, the art is a cult in his terminology. So this is a system of the culture, and literature, art, and sculpture, they have to be the subcult or the subsystems of the arts. So all of the cults there have to be under the dialectical law of the disease, construction, and destruction. The differentiation in the framework of the subsystem is, for example, the origins of the new directions that is going to describe the subcults. It only gives us the understanding for the destruction of the cult systems overall. The art as a cult, as Semenko has considered, with a permanent and the temporary construction and destruction cycles, is already in the destructive type in our times. The destruction of culture with potential construction, and it now lives the final stage of destruction on its own in this overall scale. That has been a very complex theory that Semenko has voiced out, but the main essence of it is about the relations between the construction and destruction in the framework of arts. By denouncing the death of arts, they proclaimed the start of it, the construction. The art should not decrease in one moment in all of the subcults and genres. And I would like to quote Semenko on that. The art was not liquidated straight away in all of its components. The roles will fall out one after another after all of the system is going to decline. There is the change for the culture, the decay of one element of art, that the support, the uprising of the new types of art, that the joint struggle and the collaboration between the cultural phenomena inside of the arts as it is. The pan-futurist has proclaimed that the parity of the destruction of the old art that has been stylistically close, and that is why in the framework of the destructive process in the poetry and prose no longer exist. And this is most important, it is the high time for the pan-futuristic construction. Shevchenko has explained his construction in this way. The materialization of words is only possible in dynamic and static form. The dynamic essence of the word is tightly interconnected with action. The static essence of word is about the graphic and the artistic point of view. The first is based in time, the other based in space. It's quite obvious that the poetry is interconnected with theater, or the other way it is interconnected with arts and artistry and painting. Right now we can see how we can pair it in the pan-futuristic construction. In the clearest form, we might have the clear element of structure. So we can synthesize sculpture and we can base it with arts, but it is not enough for us. I do believe that there is opportunity to integrate the poetry, painting, sculpture, and architecture. The easiest way is going to be combine it in this, the poetry plus artistry, and then this moment I am providing it together, the sculpture plus architecture with the paintings plus sculpture as the intermediary. The poetry and painting has been considered as the visual poetry. The technique requires additional materialization complexes that is going to be seen in the form of it, as Shevchenko has explained. Both of the articles that I'm quoting has been published in the Semaphore of the Future magazine that you can see in front of you right now. This leaflet of Pan-Futurism has been published in 1928, and in this very magazine, he has introduced his first tryout of this visual poetry. The poetry that was said by the ocean. It has been published in the Path of Artistry, but it has only been published as a separate text. He has said that this publication has been made without his agreement and without his approval. That can only be published in the way that it has been published in the Semaphore of the Future. It is made of the cards that have been logically based. Each card is being divided on the two vertical panels that exist separately from one another and can be read separately as well. One of the columns is divided into two horizontal panels that contain the lines. This is a telegram that should have gone all over the world. This part has been created in the telegraphic style. Maybe the horizontal layout should also reconnect us to the telegraphic stripe, that we can not only read it horizontally, but we can read it vertically, and we can really read it out perimeter wise. The second vertical column includes the text of the poem itself. The titles are made in red and black. They're numbered, they're provided in the frame, and they give the overall name of the author, which gives us the opportunity to call them the paintings as well. We know that this poem has been mostly targeted to take a look at and then only to read it. With the use of the graphic form, and you can see the different words and the different telegrams there, and thus we know that they're implementing the main tasks of the visual poetry, as Shevchenko has put it, making it a shape that has been free of the whole opinion, the opinion that holds up the synthesized notions and terms. The thoughts cannot be identified by the weak human voice. It can only see in the dynamics of mass or only by the big paintings when you can use the synthetic notions with. This is the main idea of the visual poetry, the new arts that will help us that will only develop right now, only in these Titanic days. This poem also illustrates the ideas of the visual poetry by Shevchenko as the big upholstery when you are working with the different synthetic notions. In your imagination, you can broaden this card from the picture, from the printed page up to the big artistic painting. Then you can use it. You have to see the geographical titles, technical notions, the different ideologies as being depicted there. It also gives us the principles of crosswords or the acropoem, as you can see that. At this page, for example, at this card, then you can see the dynamo and terror, and there is the material to leave and the metro that combine it, and the neighboring card, then you can see the word car, machine, then you can see the storm and oil and England and Japan that are being created out of it as a crossword. There's another My Mosaic cycle of 1922. The cycle is only made of 10 cards that have been also printed out. It has been printed out first in this Kobzar title in 1924. The publication that has happened to celebrate the 10 years of Futurism. It has included his main work throughout this 10 years. So my Mosaic cycle is made of 10 cards. As I've already said, it has been dated and signed as well. That also concerns the main card that is told the main title page for the publication. It's not like the cable poem. It is a separate card, is a separate poem. So they have been divided into rectangles and have been filled vertically and horizontally with words, numbers, and mathematical signs. The 3 cards are the word constructions with no frames. One frame is the intermediary moment. It has been framed, but it hasn't been divided into rectangles and geometrical figures. The graphical design has a very different role than in cabled poem. The letters and the words are being made in different fonts, in different typeface, bold or cursive, and they have the semantic moment as well. The first poem that is called the Avant-Garde, and you can see it on the left, they provide the space characteristics, the middle form, and the background. But you can see that the semantic meaning to that is deeper than we might say. With the help of the different typefaces and fonts, and he has also emphasized the difference between the avant-garde and arrière-garde. So you can see that the picture itself is also providing information to the readers and the viewers. In the other cases, with the help of the graphical elements, you can also provide the main emphasizing the emotional connections and the character of one of the poems out of those, one of those poems, the card that you can see on the right. Irena, Irochka, Irokez. Well, you can see that she's mentioned it in the last line. Well, she grown up and she has become the literary critic Yaryna Tsymbal, and by analyzing the first collections even before he started to do the visual poetry, she also outlined that he has doubts whether the picture depicting, it was important for him to make to depict the right words, even to make it live. And my mosaics are being divided by Oleg Hilnitsky to 2 categories, the one that are being the graphically beautiful poems and the poems that are specifically fragmented and they are violating the grammatical rules. The eccentric that are following the main visual poetry lines as the pan-futurist systems, then you can see that text is much more important than the picture of itself. The second category, the graphic, the image dominated poems that doesn't follow the 9 rules of grammar. The most important that has been the next cycles of poetry that have been also written under the influence of Kazimir Malevich, and you can see that there was 4 rectangles and they have been filled in with the nouns, the verbs, and numbers. The overall simplicity of geometrical shape, the way it's being based, and the title of it, they give us the opportunity to speak about this type of poetry as the opportunity to use the ideas of Kazimir Malevich in literature. The last category of the visual poetries of the one that but are appealing to the overall sceneries that you can see on the right. We can also see the connections with Heosh Kurupi, the auto-portrait, and Kurupi is writing the auto-portrait, identifying his name, Geo and I in different words like geography, geometry, and ego in other words as well. And he fulfills the space with the world Australia, America with his name as well. The psychotosis, publication that has been published in 1922, and even though that's the subtitle to that was the 3rd publication, that was the first publication by Heosh Kurupi. This publication has included 23 poems and 3 posters that we might call the posters with motto. Most of the researchers, they believe that those posters should also be considered the artistic text and should also be included into the psychotosis republications together with the other poems as well, understanding that there was a lot of practice of creating the poster poetry later on. Overall, on the left, you can see we have seen most of the poems that have been published in the caps, and that is why the titles, they sometimes are as the first letters in the lines, and it all looks like the acro poem, but it's not like that. The opportunity to first to make the public use the poetry as the visual component is never limited to poetry. The New Generation magazine that has started to be published in October 2025, they have published The Bear Hunting the Sun by Andrei Chizhy. The form has no connection to the sense of the novel. It's only just the game. It has been published in different shapes. Sometimes they make in letters and lines, and sometimes they are making just the breakthrough and spaces. And these two pictures, then you might see this types of publications. The figures, they have no connection to the content, to the sense of what is being written. Even the most expressive moment of the intermediality in the pan-futuristic creativity was in the synthesis of the literature and film. The film has been highly depending on photo and theater, and then from literature has become a more important part of life, and he's been providing the laws to the other subcults of arts. The film should be the matter of arts that the pan-futurism wanted to create. That's something that has been mentioned by Alexander Parahuda in his leaflet Boomerang that has been created half a year before the New Generation, spring 1927. Finally, the film has become the essence of our life, has now included into our life, and now wants to take the hegemony of our life, because there's no part of our activities where the film could not reach its hunger hands. This habit that we have spoken a lot, but now has not been created on its own. The combination is unexpected, but it's very organic, and now it has a lot of dialectic power to that. The end of quote from one of the artists of this times. A lot of pan-futurists have already tried out themselves in the young films sector at that moment in time. After 1924 and the end of the Common Cold publication, the Gong of Common Cold magazine, Mikhail Semenko in 1925, he has moved to Odessa when he has become the editor-in-chief in the main film factory. At that point, he has also engaged Mykola Bazhan into film work, that has been the editor of the film magazine, Yuri Yanovsky, that has been an editor in the Odessa Film Factory, Geo Shkurupi, that used to be the editor in the Vuvku, in all Ukrainian film and photo directory. And in the pages of the Gong of Common Cold, they have been sharing the futuristic articles by Lazar Frankel, and Lazar Frankel in the Hofstrom publication is going to publish the two of his playwrights, the Hands of China, and Alexei Kapler has also been introduced with a couple of short stories in this magazine as well. Later on, the people join New Generation, the one that has been connected to film as well. Dmitro Buskov, who's the first novel, has become a film hit, and then Buskov has become the author of the book Film and Film Factory. Alexander Parahuda, the film director, Faust Lopotinsky, the director of theater, the worker of the Odessa Film Fabrics, Leonid Skripnik, the theorist of film, Alexei Poltoratsky, and Hanna Veselovska has mentioned some of them in her speech as well. The film has stand out from just an attraction to the real literature, to the real artistic form. The literature has borrowed of it, the very precise gesture and the editorial principles, the cutouts and the editing that has provided you a lot of opportunities for experiments, has gained the futuristic attention. In the same publication, Gond of Common Cold, Geo Shkurupi has already used the editorial points. He believed that this is something that can show the best of the emotions and the main life of the proletariat. The poster approach has raised even before in the October edition of 1923 of the Pan-Futurism edition. Then you can see both the front and the back cover of it. The two poems by Igor Oksametny and Volodymyr Yevchenko, they have been titled just like this: the October poster A, the October poster B. Both of them have been worked on the proletarians of all of the countries unite. Then you can see how it's written around the perimeter of the first page, and it has been multiple times repeated in the text. The poster B is titled Proletar, Be Aware, but there's other motives that have been also identified in bold. The main importance was that you first of all see the main motto, the main vocal motto, and then with your desire, you can read out the full text that also plays the role of the paintings in the poster poetry. The most important is for the poster to have an impact. Except for the literature, posters poetry in the October edition of the Pan-Futurism, you can see that there are additional motifs that have been created by Mikhail Semenko, and the graphical design of it was by Mykola Bazhan and Heush Kurupi, and at the same time Mykola Bazhan has been designing and illustrating the books of Oleksiy Slisarenko and the poems. And you'll be able to see that. I do hope that you'll be able to see that at the exhibition in Artistic Arsenal. The editing and the cut has been used by Vadim Meller and Mark Johansson in a very original way, and both Johansson and Meller has been using that in their novel. Willy Vitselius is the pen name of Mark Johansson. They combined the text and illustration with the editorial cut principles. Meller has not only made the illustration for the book, but he actually intertwined the illustration and text as one. Sometimes the picture substitutes the words. The critics have said that it was a very nice editing of the text and illustrations. I quote, because this is one of the 10-book series. They have been published with the principles of the Pinkerton literature at that point of time, which means that every book has ended with the words to be continued, and then the next chapter has been the continuation as a separate book. The problems of the series, they are neutralized by the very nice editing, which has been made in the best way. One of the reviewers written, and that is considered to be an important psychostatical notion for comprehending all of the text, and thus it's been the organic part of the overall factor of the text as an important part of the fabrics of the text. The writer and the illustrator has really used it in the right way to show the dynamics of the plots in an adventure novel, but their most risky tryouts to combine the visual and the word images to create the new language, the film language, was the script by Lopatynsky, the novel that has been inspired by Herbert Wells' story. Lopatynsky has been experimenting in theater and in film. She had made multiple plays that has caused a lot of discussion and disapproval of the audience due to many tricks and due to many stunts that have been made on stage. What did Lopatynsky offer in his script? And I would like to quote his preface to this script on this time. I do believe that our critics, even through their red glasses and red spectacles, they will see that it's not about the high qualification and the flexibility of the word, but in those unclear images for the film that I'm trying to take to the screen. It is about the freshness of the topics that you use in the new structure of the script that I use, and I'm given the opportunities to address the screenwriter emotions to the direct emotions of the director through this main rhythm of the scenes, and using this rhythm with the help of notes, emphasizing the words, the opportunity to create a much more stronger ends for the films than not just fade outs of the diaphragma and other things. The end of quote. The Dynamo playwright was been based on the visual comprehension. It has a lot of punctuation signs. It has full stops, commas, the arrows, legatos, all of the things that have been written in the short lines that remind you of a white poem, but not the prose. It is in the way how you create the really flexible rhythm of the film story. The title of itself, Dynamo, is not only connected to the story, but also gives the overall character of the text. Lopatynsky, in his story, has been bringing up towards the futuristic ideas. It gives you the opportunity to use the different cinematic cuts. For example, the caps that are meaning that this is you doing the master shots. In the increase of the typeface, this is overall the zoom in or zoom out of the of the camera. What is very interesting that the different sizes of the typefaces has been used with the very same need and with the very same idea that in the My Mosaics by Semenko. By doing this, he's trying to provide the opportunities for the thoughts to be revealed, to be freed also, and to have influenced the dynamics of the mass according to the Semenko's understanding of the poetry and arts. The Pan-Futurism, they believe that it's one of the important stages for the liquidation of the arts, the opportunity to combine the literature and film, literature and painting, literature and photography, like, for example, the reports from Poltoratsky and Lansotnik, the Donbass Half Away, that has been published in the New Generation. It never has been published separately, but the hero of our times, and you can see the title cover of this book. One, the main text has been by Poltoratsky, and all of the photographs have been made by Dan Sotnik. There was an idea to combine literature with other types of art and to build up a highly dialectic force out of this connection, with the idea to destruct the arts and to create the meta arts as the Pan-Futurist wanted. It has given the birth the new artistic directions in the Pan-Futuristic arts, the poster poetry, the visual poetry, the photo reports, the film novel, the screened novel. Right now, all of these masterpieces have been studied as the literary legacy. But in 1925, Metal Semenko has said there is a lot of perspectives to that. In the Summer Forum of the Future, he said the idea of the painted poetry is now being widespread. In Kiev, we have a lot of ideas to make the exhibition of the painted poetry and to show the painted poetry throughout the films and the paintings. It would be very interesting for us to see those masterpieces, the one that I mentioned, that have been implemented as the paintings, for example, during the exhibitions, or as films. That would be very interesting to see them, to see those shifted factors, to see that the shifted structures that the futurists wanted to see, not only in the printed press or the printed editions as we see them right now, but also to see them in the more expositional formats, for example, at the exhibitions. And I do believe that this is going to be a very good idea for the further on exhibitions on Ukrainian futurism, because I do hope that they will have some more futuristic exhibitions to come. And the final shot in my presentation, that was the photogram by Dan Sotnik from his book, The Heroes of Our Times, even though those were the reports from Caucasus when they made this trip with Poltoratsky. But this photogram, as has been said, that this photogram is a combination between the frog and the cancer. That is basically, this is the combinations of those structures that the futurists really wanted. This is a symbolical idea of their desire to create the meta art. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Yaryna. I can only say that we have made a little bit of success. We have been slightly successful in this direction. If I speak about visualizing the painted poetry, well, you'll have a chance to take a look at that, and we will definitely be interested to take a look at that. Yes, this is the first day of this exhibition, so we'll be able to see what you've made it and what are the ideas that will live for the future. Yes, thank you very much. I'm going to read out the questions that we've had coming up for you. Yaryna, can you please tell us, did you have the followers, did Ukrainian futurists have their followers, and the ones that have been inspired by Ukrainian futurists, have you researched it, for example, as it usually happens with painters? Not only painters, did they have the followers of Ukrainian futurists? Well, if we speak only about the writers, the futurist writers, then most of them, they have been repressed throughout the time of the Big Terror of 1934, 1937. So those people who have stayed alive, they haven't continued working in the futurist direction after that. Later on, basically in the 90s already, because, for example, Mikhail Semenko's poetries they have only been republished in 1988, the same for Mike Jorgensen as well. So there is interest though the interest to them has now been restored in the 90s. For example, Serhiy Zhadan has had his thesis as well about the futurists. Okay, and the second question is, so do you believe if the futurists would have the modern technologies right now, so they would have had a better scale of planning and sort? Well, yes, I do believe. Well, actually, I do believe even that if they had the digital technology and this access to information that we have, then I am sure that their arts would have been on the biggest scale than we can see it right now. And I do know that, if the aliens should know and Martians should know about Semenko, then I know that with our opportunities, he would definitely be limited to that, and aliens would definitely know about Semenko, having our opportunities by now. Okay, thank you very much. Well, our time has already come to an end. And I would like to thank all of you. I would like to thank our dear panelists for your participation in this roundtable. Thank you for having this time. Thank you very much for your speeches that you presented to us. I would like to invite you to our exhibitions anytime. Piotr, if you'll have this opportunity to join us in Kiev, it would have been a greatest pleasure for us to see you in Mystetskyi Arsenal. Well, at least Przemysław has told us that he's planning to visit us in January, if everything will be okay.
I will try my best, definitely. It's a very exciting proposal.
Anyways, I do hope that we'll be able to have the 3D tour as well, and you'll be able to see that if you won't be able to make it. And we have constant updates on our site, and we have different visual information as well, so you can make some taste of this exhibition already. So thank you very much. We would like to thank the whole team that has been supporting us throughout this time, that has been supporting us throughout this roundtable. Wanted to thank Yulia Olenina for her support, and we would like to thank our interpreters as well. And we would like to thank all of the people who have been listening to us, who have been watching us closely. Thank you for your attention. But before we close it, I would like to also ask you to take a look at the site of Artistic Arsenal. We already have the program of the parallel events that are going to take place starting from tomorrow. This program is going to be updated on a weekly basis. I'm sure that something new and interesting is going to be happening for every one of you. And I'm sure that by the end of October, we're going to have on the 29th of October, we're going to have a performance by Serhiy Zhadan that has been already mentioned by Yaryna. We're going to have his musical performance coming in. So please, I would like to invite you once again to FUTUROMARENNIA project in Mystetskyi Arsenal that has been supported by Ukrainian Cultural Fund. Thank you for your attention. Have a nice evening. Goodbye.